This is Inman Majors. This is the story behind the story.
You're listening to the Author Stories podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Inman Majors.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Author Stories. I am your host, Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show at hankgarner.com. And while you're there, please click on the subscribe links over in the right-hand sidebar. You can subscribe on your Android phone, your iPhone, it's Stitcher Radio. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find Author Stories. We're also on YouTube. There's a link over in the right-hand sidebar as well. And you can subscribe there and never miss an episode. Today's episode is sponsored by the AIPP, the Association of Independent Publishing Professionals. If you are an indie author and you need to build a support team to help you format your book, edit your book, get a cover design for your book, anything that an indie author needs to get their book out there, the AIPP has a member that can help you make your book, your product, the very best it can be. If you look in the show notes at the bottom of this episode, you'll find a link to the AIPP, or go to aipponline.org/members and browse through the member library and find the professional to fill out your team. Like I said, anything that you need to make your indie publishing journey a success, there's a member there to help. It's a very simple website, very easy to navigate through. Go check out aipponline.org/members today and fill out your indie author team. At the end of the show, be sure to stick around for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Thanks for listening. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Troy is no longer himself. Kidnapped by aliens infected with the essence of the dead General Tomas, Troy grasps at his only hope of survival. He merges his soul with the alien parasite trying to possess him, leaving him forever changed, and not entirely for the worse. Once plagued by crippling phobias, Troy is now fearless, willing to fight his enemies with his bare hands. But with his new strength also comes a new weakness: women. Tomas was notorious for his insatiable desires, and Troy finds himself constantly resisting temptation, especially the gorgeous, manipulative Alta. Although Alta has convinced the Pyrrhans she's helping them prepare to battle the murderous Reptarans, she's actually meticulously planning to steal their ultimate power source and then abandon them to their fate. Alta won't hesitate to kill anyone in her way, and her deep love for Tomas is Troy's only advantage. He convinces Alta that Tomas has taken full control of his being and thus keeps her trust and his life. While Alta schemes, Troy covertly struggles to save the Pyrrhans and prevent the Reptarans from invading Earth. But first he must wrest back control of his own soul. Essence, Book 1, Septima, the first volume in the exciting new science fiction series by Nick Breaker. Find it on Amazon today. There's a link in the show notes. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm excited to have a special SEC version of the Author Stories podcast with my guest, Inman Majors. That's a little inside joke that we were shared before we started recording. Inman is a writer. He's a teacher. He has attended every one of the SEC schools or has a family connection to the Southeastern Conference. Welcome to the show, Inman.
Hey, Hank, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to talking to you.
I'm excited to have you. Before we get into all the goodness we're going to get into, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Man, that's a tough one. I know when I there's two answers to that. The when I knew I wanted to be a writer for sure, was when between the summer before my senior year, we were assigned to read A Death in the Family by James Agee. And so I was in Knoxville. My parents were going through a divorce. And, I read, I was a big reader, and I'd read a lot of books. And, they were set in some place crazy, like Oxford, Mississippi, or London, England, or New York City, or Chicago. And all of a sudden, I'm reading a book set in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I thought, I walked across that bridge. I've been to that movie theater. It's still there. And it just was such a revelation to realize that you could actually write fiction about Knoxville, Tennessee. So that's when it really hit. But, when I was a little kid, I remember, my mom was an English teacher at Tullahoma High School in Tennessee, and then later Lenore City High School. So she was a reader, and my dad was a huge reader, read all the time. And I remember, at 5 or 6, pulling one of my dad's books off the shelf and said, "I'm going to write a book." So I just took the book off the shelf, and I started copying the words. I was going I'm going to learn how to write, so this is how you write a book. I was going to practice, and then I realized after about 30 words, this is going to take me forever. So I gave that up. I distinctly remember that. So for some reason, words and books always called to me.
Well, that's a really great memory though, because I think you were on to something there at such a young age that you knew instinctively that to be a writer you needed to understand writing, and you understand writing by looking at the way other people did it, and sometimes you start off with someone else's words until you find your own, yeah, it's pretty cool that you just kind of instinctively knew to start with what had already been done.
Copying, I copied writers I'm still copying writers.
Oh, we all do, yeah.
I think that's how I don't remember who it's a great quote. Every writer is the reader moved to imitation. At some point in time, you had your James Agee moment where there's a writer that said, "I want to make somebody else feel the way this book makes me feel." And so I think we all start there. Some book, some writer, something stirs us in a way that makes us desire to stir other people. And it's a communal thing, So I think that's where most writers start.
Yeah. From that point on, from the 6-year-old burgeoning author, where did you go from there? Was this something that you continued to pursue, or were you like some folks who take a sabbatical from writing to get into real life and then come back to it?
Yeah, I wasn't what you read these writers, these writers that say that they're writing all along. They wrote 5 novels by the time they were 12. I was a regular kid. I was really into sports. If I could have been an athlete, I would have never gotten into writing.
Said half the people listening to the show.
Exactly. If you do anything else, why else would you do it? But I always loved reading. I remember when the miniseries Roots came out.
Yeah.
I was 12 years old, and really, I watched a lot of it. Usually, it would end too late for me. I had to go to bed beforehand, on a school night. But it moved me, and so I read 700, 800 pages of Roots between my 6th and 7th grade.
The Alex Haley book.
Yeah, and my parents were cool about that. They would we weren't spoiled, but my dad, if you were at the bookstore and you had a book you're looking at, my dad would say, "You want that book?" And I say, "Yes, sir." And you could always get a book.
Right.
If you wanted to get a book, Dad never said no, or Mom never said no. And so I got back to Cedar Bluff Middle School, which is a really good public school in Knoxville. I got a good education there, and my teacher. Did anybody read a book this summer? And I read Jaws, which is pretty R-rated for. I think my parents knew what I was reading, and she was frankly, openly skeptical that I had read the book. And she said, "Why don't you write me an essay about it?" So, I wrote her an essay about it. And then after that, she realized that I actually read the book. So I was always a reader. I was kind of like a jock reader. I played basketball and football and baseball. And then, I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized, you made the joke about SEC football earlier. My Uncle John was a longtime coach at Tennessee. My grandfather was a longtime coach at Swanee in Tennessee.
University of the South.
That's right. And so he had 5 kids. 3 played football at Tennessee. My dad played at Florida State with Burt Reynolds. My uncle Larry played football at Swanee. And so at some point, and our family was pretty well known in the state of Tennessee. And I think, I kind of hate to admit this, but I think at some point I was like, I'm never going to get my name out there playing football. Teachers keep saying I'm pretty good at writing. Maybe I'll try that. I want to get famous, man. Somehow, I'm still trying. So I think there's it's a mixed bag of how you get here. I'm 53 and knocking around with this for 20 years. How you get to be a writer is, it's not just one thing. I don't think, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to college at Vandy, then you got your MFA from Alabama, and now you're a professor of English at James Madison. What did you major in at Vandy?
English. I mean, some of it was, I wasn't, even if I tried at math and physics and chemistry and stuff like that, I wouldn't have been any good.
Yeah.
Now, I was a pretty lackadaisical student, and I got a really good high school education. So I got to college, and I realized that the teachers didn't take attendance, and that if I, read the book and showed up for the test, I could squeeze by with a gentleman's B-.
Right.
So I wasn't a very great or committed college student, but I read all the way through. So I was reading books for fun. So I mean, I was just always a reader. Without being a student. Vanderbilt, my education with Vanderbilt was learning not to be so intimidated and mystified by rich people. I was kind of suburban kid. So I got a social education at Vanderbilt more than a traditional education.
Yeah. Well, my theory about college was C's get degrees. And I stuck by that.
Absolutely. Get the good, man. But in grad school, I never missed a class. I took 4 years off between Vanderbilt and Tuscaloosa. In grad school, I was dead on serious.
Yeah.
I was 26. I was there 4 years. There's a 3-year degree, but if they would let you take a 4th year, and so at Bama, you taught 2 classes and you took 2 classes. So I was a student teacher.
Oh, wow.
You got paid $800 a month. And in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in the early 90s, you could get about $800 a month. I was like, who else is going to pay me $800 to drink beer and write books?
Exactly. You said something a minute ago that I want to come back to for just a second. You said at Vanderbilt, you really got a social education there. As someone who is a definite character writer, now you really write these vivid characters. Do you trace at least some of that back to that time at Vanderbilt when you were learning to to get used to people that were not like you, or maybe look through people's facades that they put on and the airs that they put on, and kind of get to the heart of who people are and characters? Do you think some of that comes from that?
I think so, but to set the record straight, there was no one putting on more airs than me.
Of course,
I was posing as the rebel artist or something. I don't know what I was posing. I was neither. Vanderbilt wasn't a great fit for me. I made a lot of great friends there, but it really wasn't a great fit for me. So my 10 best friends in the world are from college, but they were all fellow freaks. But I tell you what, the cool thing about Vanderbilt is that I'd never been around people from New Jersey. And so, it's like, I had this preconception of people from, other parts of the world. And all of a sudden you realize, hey, I've been hanging out with this guy for 3 hours. He's pretty cool. Or this gal for 3 hours. And so it really did expose me to people from different parts of the world, which was absolutely healthy. And you know, I was a guy that, I hope my kids will not be allowed to listen to this. I was the guy that probably went out 7 nights a week. I had a bartending job at kind of the beer joint in town, Jonesy's, draft beer and jukebox music. What's interesting about Vanderbilt, really, as far as you asked the question about how did my national experience, I'm sort of extrapolating here. My father was a lobbyist at the time in Nashville for the state legislature. And so, you know, back then there was a lot of the lobbyist job was to take senators, representatives out for dinner, you know, and talk about your bill. So on a Tuesday night, my dad would come in, hey, I'm taking out Senator so-and-so and Representative so-and-so to dinner at Jimmy Kelly's, this old this great old speakeasy. He's been around since the 1920s. It's like the political hangout. You will come along. So I just sit there and not talk and listen to them talk politics and everything else in the world. And so, you know, my second book is a political comedy, and my third, Wonder Dog, set in Tuscaloosa. That's kind of a wild ass book. And then my third book, I think my best book, is The Millionaires, which is a big political comedy. And, you know, I couldn't have written either one of those books without hanging out with my dad and these politicians at Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse.
What is it about this thread of comedy that runs through all of your books? You know, there's a great tradition of kind of biting satire, and you seem to have tapped into that. What is it about that kind of writing that really turns you on?
You know, I think I'm not sure how biting mine are. Maybe, I don't know. They're Wonder Dog's got a little bite to it, but you know, my favorite comedies are satirical, but they're not just harsh. You know, right. I wanted to slide the dagger in from the back. You know, so
in a hug.
Hello. Take this. I think Elvis Costello said it. What's his line? I used to be disgusted, and now I try to be amused. So. A lot of my comedies, this last one, Penelope Lemon, doesn't fit this. It's just a joyful book to begin with. But my Wonder Dog is a political comedy. I was just sick of politics. I was sick of idiots. But I couldn't write when I was mad. I had to wait till I was past the anger and disgust. And then the stuff I was mad about, I find funny. And so the best way to undercut the bully is to laugh at him. And then, Love's Winning Plays is my book before this one, and it's a SEC football satire comedy. And so, you know, my uncle was the coach, as I mentioned, and you know, as a kid, I was up in the stands, and I'd hear they were losing, and you'd hear some guy yelling at your uncle, and so that kind of got under my skin a little bit. But now that I'm the age I am, I found it funny, and so I sort of had some fun with it. But I hope my favorite comedies, you know, I love P.G. Wodehouse. And all his books are sweet. You know, mine aren't as sweet as his. Even Confederacy of Dunces, you know, which is, I think, the greatest comedy ever written. You can tell the author has a lot of fun. I mean, you can make fun of something or expose something and still not reveal them completely. Still not strip the character down in a way that exposes them. There's always a element or nugget of sympathy, even for the freakies of the freaks. So I like that stuff better than just, you know, a really, you know, harsh tone. I don't like a harsh tone too much in my comedy.
Well, you know,
Charles Portis is the best. His tone, he's the best comic writer of the South, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a real skill to writing satire and comedy that is still good-hearted in a way, that you can expose things about the world. You can bring light to things while still actually having a sense of humor. When it goes to just being mean-spirited, there's not much comedy left in when it's mean-spirited. You know, that only goes so far. I think anybody can do mean-spirited.
Right. You know, I teach a comedy class at JMU, and so, you know, there's stuff that, you know, some people get some kid, usually a guy, writes something that he thinks is funny and maybe it's a little immature, and some people take offense. And so the question is it funnier than it is mean? So you don't want to get people to be risk averse. Right. I think art you got to take some chances, but is it funnier than it is mean? And what's difficult is that's subjective. It's funny. I taught fiction writing forever at JMU, and I said I'm going to do this comedy writing class. I said, it'll be fun and lighthearted. It's always my toughest class because people are very serious and committed to what they think is funny, and even more serious and committed to what they think is not funny. So I've got people that absolutely hate Will Ferrell, and I have people that really absolutely think Will Ferrell is hilarious. So I mean, comedy of all things is people are really personal about that. How dare you think that's funny when I don't? So that's comedy's tough, man. It's tough to write. It's tough to teach.
Well, and if you can have the reader laughing at themselves a little bit while they're laughing at everyone else, instead of just standing around laughing at the person that's the butt of it, I think you'll earn more fans. And I think you'll get your point across more if you can get the reader to not only see the faults in others, but maybe the faults in themselves at the same time.
Well said. Very well said. It's like everybody that I'm sort of having some fun with has a bit of me in them.
You're right.
Like, the biggest tool in this last book. There's a portion of Inman Majors that is making fun of himself and exposing himself. Here's another thing I tell my students, like, you talk about looking at the characters as opposed to empathizing with the characters. Ha ha. The bug in the jar versus the participatory thing. No risk for the writer. It's just not worth it. So the writer at all times must be somehow at risk. I define a risk by somehow exposing something about themselves. That there's a part of your personality, or maybe just the ambition of what you're trying to do, but you have to be risking something. You can't be sitting afar and pointing and looking or exposing. That then you're not engaged and there's no immediacy.
Right. How long have you been teaching at James Madison?
14 years at James Madison. I was 4 years at Alabama. I was 5 years at Motlow State Community College in Tullahoma. And I was 3 years at Hollins, which is all women. And now I'm at JMU. So I've been at a lot of different places, and I've had fun at all of them.
I bet you have. One thing that I've noticed when I doing this podcast for one, or when I've done some workshops and things like that, is that most of the time when you're teaching or sharing, just kind of digging for the for that gem that you're looking for, is that as the teacher, you usually learn along with the students, even material that you've covered over and over again. There's something about the act presenting to someone else and bringing someone else along that's an educational experience for the teacher as well. Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely. Workshops get a bad name. That's the whole thing. They talk about there's too many. Our NFA programs get a bad name, and I think there's something to that. They can get a little. It depends on the program, though. But I will read a story before class. It says it's a class of 15 people. It's a intro or advanced fiction class, and I've read the story and I write my comments. But 80% of the best things I say, 80% of the most helpful things I might say to a student about how to, think about writing or how to maybe make the story better, comes from something a student has said. It's like musicians jamming. A good class, somebody say something, and somebody say something, and then stuff just builds. And all of a sudden, you start seeing where it can come from. It's like the author didn't know that story was there. The teacher didn't know that story was there. No one in the class knew that story, but somebody talking about it, you realize, okay, this is the way. This is exactly what you're going for. And sometimes the story needs 10% to change, and sometimes it's 80% to change. And usually when it's going well, the students who's being workshopped agrees as well, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, a lot of times you're working harder on the story than the student did, But exactly what you said there's something about the students' feedback that interchange is fun and interesting and that's the best part about teaching. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that and seeing someone get it for the first time, when you see that light switch on and you're like, okay, something just woke up in this person. That's worth its weight in gold as well.
And it's awesome. And, the difference between the first story of the semester to the third, when you start getting a shared vocabulary, and maybe they think, they're pretty good. Maybe they are pretty good, but all of a sudden they've read a classmate story that is, over the top awesome. And they go, oh, so that's where we're supposed to be. And so reading your classmates gets you better too. So that, it's an esoteric thing to describe if you haven't been in there. But that when you start jamming like that, it really is like, I think I'm not a musician, but from what I've read about musicians, when you really just start, it's improvisational and it's spontaneous, and everybody. When you get a whole class speaking the same vocabulary and understanding that we're not here, no one's here is trying to tear you down. My first day of class, I say half your grade is your fiction, half your grade is making everybody else in this class a better writer. And so the onus is on them to be an editor. And I say, you're not trying to tell this person how to write the story you want them to write. You're trying to take the story as given and help them make the story they want to write. And so the onus is, on you're an editor for 15 other people in the room.
Wow. That's awesome. So you have published 5 novels now, with the newest one being Penelope Lemon. Game On is the newest book. The first line of the description made me laugh because I could see this character when I first saw it. Penelope Lemon is a recent divorcee, closet Metallica fan, and accidental subversive to all the expectations of suburban motherhood. Who is Penelope Lemon, and how did she come to you?
That's Penelope Lemon. That's a tough one. She's a bunch of people. Well, she's about 1 million different cool girls I grew up with, about 1 million different women I've known living half my life in towns like Tullahoma, Tennessee, or Waynesboro, Virginia. She's the sharp, smart gal that maybe dropped out of college to marry a guy because he's good looking and fun, and didn't get back. She's all the women I taught at Motlow State Community College who came back to school when they were 40 and said, and it's she's just a gal, a woman that's meets life on its own terms. She perhaps has underrated herself at times, or didn't have the money to do certain things, but she's always going to get by, and she's always going to be herself, and wherever she goes, she's going to attract people because she's cool and smart and capable.
When you first got the idea for this book, did Penelope come to you kind of fully formed, or did you have the idea for the setting? Kind of what was the how does a story generally start for you? Do you get a character? Do you get a plot device, or kind of what's the beginning usually like for you?
It's changed for all 5. With each, it's a cliche, but each you finish a novel, you start another. It's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to write a novel. I know what am I doing here? I should go mow the lawn. So Wonder Dog, my second book. All my friends were harassing me. This is when the legal thriller in the early '90s was all the rage, and so most of my buddies from college were lawyers. They go, you need to write this. So just to be ornery, one day I was lying in bed and I woke up in the middle of the night and I wrote down, like everyone else in the world, I am a lawyer. And so I carried that line around in my wallet for about 2 years before I used the first line for Wonder Dog. And so that whole book took off for that one line. I never plot them out. This book, I I was coaching my son's little league Pee Wee baseball in Waynesboro, and half the team or more, these little kids were being raised by 26, 27-year-old single moms, and I just couldn't believe. And then I have 3 kids, no dad in the picture, and somehow they got to practice somehow, and they and the ladies themselves were funny and cool, and they might call up, say, hey, Jerome's not going to practice today. I blew out a head gasket on my car, but he'll be there tomorrow. And but they didn't particularly feel that life was unfair. That this was life. That life was scrambling and hustling, and just getting by somehow and just doing it, just take care of business no matter what came through. So my original idea was to write a serious book about that sort of person. Then I had an illness. I'm fine now, but it was a pretty extended, long illness. And when I got better, it's like, man, I want to write something funny to make myself laugh. And so I just decided to write. And where my office is in Waynesboro. I used to live in Waynesboro, Virginia. I was home a lot, and my house was kind of the hangout for my wife and her friends. So like, I'd be in my office, which was right next to the kitchen where they're hanging out, and I kept overhearing these stories. And so I said, they got something going on that men don't know about. There's a whole world of women talking that men have no idea about. So that was that was intriguing to me. And so today, the short answer is I have no idea where this came from, except it's about 10 different things.
Right. But you just have to be there and be ready, don't you?
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah. I tell my students, if you want to be a writer, you have to allow yourself to write a lot of bad fiction. You have to allow that. You have to sit there and say that is a terrible sentence. What I just wrote is horrible. And you sit there for I'm not supposed to sit there for 6 to 8 hours. These writers that sit there for 8 hours, I don't understand that. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours for me is a pretty good day. Now in grad school, I could do it longer. But now 2 hours for me is a pretty good day. Some days I might get 1,200 words, but most days it's 500. But even so you sit there for I stink, but I tell my students, you have to lie to yourself, and the bad angel on your shoulder saying that stinks, that's not good, that's not the Great Gatsby. You have to shut them off and just lie to yourself, saying this may not be good now, but I can fix it later. Just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. I'm a guy that believes, I'm a writer that believes, get the words down, get something down. And then you stink for 4 days in a row, and all of a sudden the muse says, okay, I've appreciated your effort. Here's a gift. Next thing you know, you're like typing like J. Lee Lewis with your leg up, it's just coming to you. And all of a sudden you're rolling. So, but the muse doesn't come when you want it to come. The muse comes, I think the muse rewards effort.
Well, yeah, it's like that old adage, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And half of writing is just showing up and putting your butt in the chair.
No question.
Yeah. And also, you can't edit a blank page. Getting crappy words down is better than no words.
I read some author, I wish I remember who it was. It's a great quote. When the book is finished, I can't recall the days when I thought it stunk when I read over it versus the days when I thought it was great. I can't recall. And so that really stuck. And I read it within the last 3 years. That's the truth. When you got 300 pages, that gives you confidence. There's something, the pages, the words, that volume of words, my first book I cut, oh my gosh, I cut this. I got time for a quick story.
Oh yeah.
So, I met my wife when I was 32, living with my grandmother in Winchester, Tennessee, unemployed at the old Jimmy Kelly's where I used to bartend after grad school. I couldn't find a teaching job, and she was the hostess. And so I had nothing to give her, but luckily she was an English major. I said, I've read this novel. And this publisher who ended up not publishing said, I think it's got something here, but I think it's too long. So it's 450-page manuscript. I said, why don't we go to the beach and let's edit this book? I didn't have any money, but I had a credit card. I didn't tell her, I think she thought I was a trust fund guy or something, which I wasn't. So we go to the beach. I said, I'm going to read first. I suggested I'll read first and you read right behind me. And, and so about page 5, I found a sentence and I wrote cut, ? beside it. And she wrote yes. 3 pages later, I wrote cut, ? yes. Then, a paragraph, cut, ? yes. A page, cut, ? yes. 5 pages in a row, cut, ? yes. I never wrote the word cut without her saying yes. So we took with the help of my very smart and patient wife, we cut a 450-page manuscript down to 280.
Whoa.
I had 170 pages I didn't know I needed. And I've been staring. I was grown. I was 32. I'd had an MFA. I thought I knew what I was doing. I had 170 or 80 pages I didn't need. But it took me that two or 3 years to see that. I'm faster now about seeing what I don't need, but it took me a long time I'm a writer that writes big and then cuts. I think there's other writers that, write thin, need to fill out. And so I always write big, but I've gotten better, a little more succinct as I've gotten older. But I mean, it's just funny how, you can see stuff in other people's work that needs to be cut, but in your own, it's very, very tough.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can't even see what is superfluous and extra until you get yourself a little time and get away from it and come back with that serious editor's eye.
Oh yeah, a serious editor who's also pretty good looking that you want to marry. Yeah, that helps.
That does help. Yeah, if she's cute, that helps, and all that good stuff.
On that one, what I realized was that I didn't know anything about writing a book. So I was getting my MFA in poetry at Alabama, and I thought, well, I'm going to try to write a novel in the summer. I always thought I was probably more a fiction writer than a poet, and so I read that Ernest Hemingway wrote 1,000 words a day. I said, all right, I'm going to do that. Well, so what I realized that week with with Christy is that what I wrote on Monday I needed. It was a scene, stuff was happening, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday I was just writing just to keep going. And a lot of that was just when the character's by himself, just sort of thinking about things, pondering things, navel gazing. And then on Friday, something else was happening. So what I realized was I had a lot of the character by himself. So another thing I tell my students is that, when you have a character by himself, by herself, thinking, it's always more interesting to the writer than it is to the reader. That you need to have characters as much as possible interacting with other people, and it needs to be a participatory. So and some of that's just the young writer not knowing, and some of it's the young writer, pretty in love with their own voice and their own thoughts, and you grow out of that. But it was interesting that it took me 3 years to realize that I was just being a monologuing bore for a lot of my novel.
Oh man. Inman, it seems to me that you kind of love characters that are, how can I say, maybe a bit of a dichotomy. Penelope is a, divorcee, closet Metallica fan, accidental subversive. She looks like this thing, but she's not really. Her husband James, the woodsy intellectual, but favors silky kimonos. You draw these really great contrasts in people. Do you know where that comes from, or what is it that fascinates you about things that are and are not what they seem?
That's a good question. Really, I hadn't ever had it put that way. But I remember my dad saying he played football at Florida State, but he's also he wasn't a good student, but he was smart. He just blew off class. He was playing bridge till 4:00 in the morning.
And he was getting the real education.
Yeah. So, but he's also in a fraternity. He said the fraternity guys thought I was a jock, and the jocks thought I was either a frat guy or an intellectual. And so, that's resonated with me for a long time. But I think everybody's like that. I think I don't like characters that sort of like he or she is this. This is the country redneck idiot. This is the. I think the writing I like has characters that maybe work at Dollar General, and they're reading, they read a lot, So I think the South especially suffers from that, from this sort of reductive idea of, what a person in Meridian, Mississippi or Tullahoma, Tennessee is like, that there are people in Meridian, Mississippi and Tullahoma, Tennessee that, have read Dostoevsky, perhaps, or if not, when I was at Motlow Community College, I had these farm kids showing stuff at 4-H, and I'd tell them to do a compare and contrast essay, and they're comparing Ludacris to some other rapper, So the idea that everybody down in Tullahoma, Tennessee is on a tractor. These kids were on a tractor, but they're wearing overalls. They were dressed hip. And they had cable. They knew what was going on. So I'm really just writing the people I know. So this is not intentional. I think people are multi-layered and complicated. I think life is multi-layered and complicated, and not easily reduced.
Absolutely. I was hoping that you were going to go there, because I'm a big fan of three-dimensional characters, and I'm also a big fan of books that don't easily fall into one genre, because life doesn't fall into one genre, and people don't fall into that, and people don't fall into this. This is the good guy. This is the bad guy. And, even though there obviously is real evil in the world and all that, we're not going there, but I'm just talking about people that are just not what they seem at first blush, because we're all very complicated people.
Yeah, man. I mean, exactly. For the record, though, we'd all do better if we just decided we're going to be genre writers. They actually sell books and make money. The folks that are like us, that are neither fish nor fowl, that's a tougher audience to find, But I agree, but
we say that, and John Grisham says, "Hold my beer and watch." It's like, okay.
Well, John Grisham lives in Charlottesville, where I live. Greatest guy in the world. Here's what a great guy he is. He has agreed to host a series at JMU, the John Grisham Writers Hour, where he's going to be interviewing other writers. He's like the interviewer. And so our first writer in October will be James McBride, African-American writer who won, I think, the 2011 National Book Award. And then we've got Alice McDermott coming this spring. So anybody in Virginia, near Harrisburg, Virginia, come out. This is going to be a really cool show.
He's doing the convocation at Mississippi State next week, and I'm going to be there, so I'm excited about seeing him.
Try to meet me, coolest guy in the world. I would hang out with this guy if he sold insurance.
Absolutely. Inman, the new book, Penelope Lemon, Game On, is available everywhere now. We're going to put a link to it in the show notes. I've had a blast hanging out with you this evening. We've got to do it again. Where can people find you online if they want to dig into your back catalog and get to know you and your work a little better?
As of about 2 months ago, my 8th grade son has this computer genius buddy who designed a website for me. It doesn't look like it's designed by 8th grader. It's inmanmajors.com. I've got a Facebook author page, Inman Majors, dramatic comma author. I'm sort of out there. If you decide to buy a book, independent bookstores are always the way to go. But I'm also on the behemoth Amazon.
You're right. As you need to be these days. But yes, support.
Yes.
Yeah, but support your independent bookstores for sure.
No question.
Inman, it's been a blast hanging out. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Hey, this is so much fun. It should be illegal.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Hello, young one. What ghoulish tale of horror shall we explore tonight? Shall we watch The Creep Show? The Nightmare on Elm Street? Child of the night, give me your answer.
Which one would Mom kill us for watching? Said Buddy. Dad grinned and his eyes grew wide.
Which do you think, child of the jackal?
The Omen!
And we might have time for Omen too, if we hurry. She'll be home by 11.
I'll be back. Buddy ran to his room. He stripped down to his Yoda underwear and fished in the closet. 2 minutes later, he snuck back into the living room wearing his skeleton costume from last Halloween. He crept up behind his dad, who was cueing the movie. But David Rittermeyer was too clever for that. He spun around at the last moment and bared fanged teeth torn from paper plates, drawing a yip of surprise and a cry of, "No fair!" Daddy kicked off his Reeboks, plopped his smelly gym socks on the coffee table, another thing that Mom would hate, and killed the lights. The scary intro music began. The screen showed the silhouette of a boy, about Buddy's age. His shadow was a long, creepy cross. The Antichrist, the son of the devil. Born of a jackal on a night of astrological portent, destined to bring about the end times and the final battle of good versus evil. Buddy sipped Sunkist and scooted up next to his dad. As the movie got scarier, he slipped an arm through his father's and cupped his big bicep. Buddy could feel his father's pulse. Dads get scared too. They flinched together, shouted together, pointed at the screen and covered their faces together. Buddy pressed his eyes to Daddy's shoulder just before the on-screen maid shouted, "It's all for you, Damien!" and dove from the roof, hanging herself. Buddy knew which parts he was old enough to watch and which parts he wasn't. He trusted his dad to let him know when to look again. Occasionally, his dad tricked him into peeking too soon, but that was part of the fun. They kicked their feet at the screen and shouted, "Look up! Look up! Oh, idiot! Don't get yourself killed!" At the climax, the hero of the movie, Mr. Thorne, discovered a birthmark of 3 6s on his son's head and dragged the little Antichrist to the altar of the church, determined to spear his son with holy daggers and end evil forever. After it was over, the Rittermeyer men sat silently through the credits. David put an arm around his son and ran his fingers through Buddy's hair. He wasn't searching for devil marks. He knew there weren't any. And Buddy was certain there were no daggers in his father's hand, either. Those things were just make-believe. Real fathers and sons don't do bad things to each other. They were queuing up Omen 2 when the power went out. "No," Buddy whined. "Not on movie night." Daddy went to the window. "It's the whole block. Sorry, Damien. How about, scary blackout. Go get the Ouija board out of the guest room closet." "Cool. And candles." Buddy found the Ouija board, hidden under old clothes. When he shut the sliding door again, the sight of a monster startled him, and he let out an involuntary, "huh" sound. It was his own skeleton-bodied reflection in the mirrored closet door. He stared at it. He liked the effect of moonlight on his cheeks. Spectral, haunted, his eyes big and white. He clacked his teeth at himself, picturing his own grinning skull under his child's flesh, and gave an evil laugh. He was answered by a scream. A woman's scream. High-pitched and far away. One of the neighbors? Buddy dropped the Ouija board into a patch of moonlight and sat with it. "What's going on?" he whispered, his fingers on the heart-shaped wood planchette.